Welcome to this explainer. Okay, let's jump right in. Today, we're unpacking a truly fascinating intersection of ideas. We're looking at how a very specific theological framework is being directly applied to regional politics, constitutional law, and even voter mobilization. It's incredibly rare to see the spiritual and the fiercely political blended this explicitly, but the source documents we're digging into today do exactly that. So, if you love seeing how seemingly unrelated forces collide in the real world, you are definitely in for a treat.
Here's our roadmap for today. 1. Defining spiritual mapping. 2. The geography of belief. 3. The Sabah assignment. 4. Reclaiming political inheritance. And 5. Activating the mandate.
All right, Section 1, Defining Spiritual Mapping.
So this framework introduces a core concept called spiritual mapping. And what's wild is that it's explicitly positioned not just as a religious practice, but as actual intelligence gathering. They literally call it intelligence for the invisible war. The authors frame this mapping as the direct antidote to what they call strategic ignorance. Basically, they're setting up a worldview where there's an invisible battle happening all around us, and mapping it out is the only way to actually fight back effectively.
They break this down further into the discipline of spiritual reconnaissance. Just look at the recipe here. Believers are essentially being called to act as spiritual anthropologists. They're told to combine historical research with biblical revelation and spirit-led discernment. The ultimate goal? To diagnose the underlying spiritual condition of a specific geographic area. You're basically treating historical data as actionable spiritual intelligence.
Now, to legitimize this method, the authors draw a really hard line. They set up the stark contrast between their approach, which they call biblical intelligence, and what they consider the opposing side, labeled occult cartography. They argue that while occultists are out there trying to manipulate energies through divination, their own spiritual mapping is all about establishing Christ's lordship through truth. They're very carefully defining the boundaries here, making sure to frame their practice as a righteous intelligence operation, zero mysticism involved.
Moving right along, Section 2, the geography of belief. Here, the authors argue that geography itself is not spiritually neutral. Instead, they propose that historical events leave a permanent, invisible mark on a territory. They specifically call out past bloodshed, idolatry, and broken covenants as things that can actually defile the land. In this worldview, these historical events keep shaping the social and religious character of a place long after they happen. The past is never just the past, it's an active spiritual stain on the map.
So how do they respond to a defiled map? Well, that brings us to informed intercession. By understanding the heavily researched history of a region, followers aren't just praying vaguely into the void. The document claims this research allows them to shift from vague anxiety to targeted prayer. And the goal of that targeted prayer is to remove the legal grounds of spiritual strongholds. It's a highly methodical, almost surprisingly legalistic approach to spiritual warfare.
And this brings us to a brilliant pivot. By placing these ideas side by side, we can clearly see how the broad, abstract theology of spiritual mapping on the left gets picked up and applied directly to a highly specific, real-world geopolitical battleground on the right. That battleground? The Malaysian state of Sabah.
Which leads us to Section 3, the Sabah assignment.
Our second source document is actually titled Sabah, the Kingdom Assignment. And the subtitle really doesn't pull any punches. The battle for Sabah is spiritual, not just political. This is essentially a full-blown manifesto that takes earthly, administrative, and political struggles within Malaysia and elevates them straight to the level of cosmic warfare.
The manifesto actually commands followers to map the unseen battlefield in Sabah. But take a close look at what it identifies as territorial strongholds that need to be dismantled. It lists ancestral syncretism, which it tags as PIM, and demographic manipulation, tagged as PIS. Now, these are highly charged, very real socio-political issues in Sabah involving cultural practices and shifting demographics. Yet, in this framework, they're diagnosed and targeted as spiritual enemies on an invisible battlefield.
All right, Section 4, reclaiming political inheritance.
Here is where the spiritual language seamlessly transitions into strict legal and political demands. The document demands the enforcement of the MA-63 Covenant. For some quick context, MA-63 refers to the Malaysia Agreement of 1963. This manifesto rejects the idea of Sabah being just a 13th state, pushing hard to restore its legal identity as an equal, founding partner of the Federation. So they've taken a constitutional debate and framed it as a divine mandate.
And the financial stakes tied to this spiritual mission? Absolutely staggering. We are talking about our reclaimed inheritance valued at 1.5 trillion ringgit. Let that sink in. This is a massive escalation from a theological framework to concrete, real-world financial restitution. It's not framed as a policy negotiation, it's framed as reclaiming a stolen birthright, a divine inheritance that has been unjustly withheld.
Furthermore, they are completely rigid in their financial demands. The manifesto insists on Sabah getting its full 40% net revenue entitlement. The text explicitly tells followers not to settle for interim grants. It frames this 40% not as some political compromise to be hashed out, but as a matter of absolute constitutional restitution.
To actually secure this incredible wealth, the framework demands a cleansing of the institutional web. And they get super specific here. It explicitly targets over 250 state-linked companies, or GLCs, demanding full accountability. The stated goal is to ensure Sabah's wealth actually serves the people and stops enriching the connected few. Notice what just happened? The abstract spiritual concept of cleansing defiled land has now been directly mapped onto auditing state-owned corporations to root out corruption. It's wild.
Finally, Section 5, activating the mandate.
So, how does this manifesto direct people to take action? Well, it issues an ultimate call titled Activate Your Apostolic Mandate. Step 1, adopt a KAPM consciousness. Step 2 takes all of this spiritual warfare and constitutional demanding and drives it straight to the ballot box. It urges followers to use their consciousness to vote for leaders who will actually root out corruption. And step 3 is the ultimate endgame, building a righteous future for the homeland. It is a complete, unbroken pipeline from targeted prayer to targeted voting.
I want to leave you with this final thought to ponder. We've just explored a highly structured system that takes constitutional grievances and literal trillions in financial stakes and fuses them completely with divine purpose and spiritual warfare. So, when a regional political movement is framed not just as a civic duty, but as a cosmic spiritual mandate, how does that fundamentally change the way a citizen approaches the ballot box? Does it make compromise completely impossible? Does voting become an act of faith? It is a fascinating dynamic to observe and a real testament to how powerful ideas can shape our world. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and remember to always keep questioning the frameworks around you.